Today, we're talking about tool sprawl, identity fragmentation, and why more security tools do not automatically reduce risk. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted with SST, the LinkedIn live show where we deep dive into the real, unfiltered world of IT, cybersecurity, and business technology. Brought to you by SST, we're here to cut through the noise, share expert insights, and tackle the challenges shaping the future of managed IT services. Live, raw, and unscripted. Today, we have Bo Elson and Troy Tobin from Team SST. They're going to share their insights on what they're seeing across organizations that have invested heavily in security tools but still lack clarity around their risk exposure. Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen.
How you
Thank you.
doing?
So before we jump in, I think let's just give everybody listening kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about here. So again, the security tools and tool sprawl and how it creates more complexity will be our first kind of subject. Then we'll work into identity, fragmented identities, and then really what's a better approach than tool sprawl and that fragmented identity, and really how do you establish a manage and measurable security program. Does that sound fair to you guys?
Sounds good.
All right. So to jump right in, then, Troy, I guess we're seeing organizations with multiple security tools, and they spend a lot of money on these tools, and maybe just trying to solve individual problems. But yet, often I feel like leadership still is very uncertain with regards to what they have, why they have it, and really what's going on. Again, what do you see out there with regards to that? Is that true? I mean, what is that?
Yeah, I mean that's the tool spiral part of it. I mean, I feel like I'm on the sales side. When I get into organizations, they really don't know the threats individually and how to plug those gaps with a single tool, or they just buy a tool that often a salesperson tells them will resolve maybe a box for their insurance, whether it be EDR or vulnerability scanning or something like that. But a lot of these tools have multiple functions, right? So you may buy a tool for one thing and a tool for another thing, and there's duplication of effort, which can cause some problems. So just going through and buying based on your insurance requirements isn't always the right way to go if you're not getting good consultation. The other thing, that we see is a number, once you have tool sprawl issues, you have a number of panes of glass to look at, right? So, being organized and making those decisions to allow you to report and have visibility into what those tools are seeing is important. Just buying from a sales guy on a list of paper is not always the way to go. We also see when maybe a new tool is purchased, the old one isn't decommissioned. And maybe it's decommissioned in part of the environment, but not also all of it. So then you run into issues where, multiple tools doing multiple things. Maybe there's some issue with, actually impacting the desktop experience because of errors or performance. So we see that a lot as well. And then, with some of the cloud environments, do they have legacy RMM tools that are conflicting with some of the new cloud-focused security tools? So it's just, I guess, across the board, that's kind of the things that I'm seeing in each and every environment that I get into.
So you'd say it's expensive, and it brings in maybe more expenses and a level of inefficiency within the organization, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, I've heard from some business leaders or IT leaders that, they have these multiple tools because they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket, which maybe there's something there, but realistically, you want to align your tools for each security problem and make it as efficient as possible to track those issues, not just have, 5 different vendors for every different security issue out there.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, one thing just to add on to that a little bit would be, where we see too is like not knowing why you're putting those security tools in place. So like we'll use a cybersecurity framework because you do need layered security out at your site. Like it's not just run a single tool and you're going to solve all your technology problems, but you need to know why you're using those tools and how they all fit together. And the other part that we see too quite often is once somebody has a tool in place, it's really hard. Like they get comfortable with it, they're going to use it, and then it's like doesn't quite meet the requirements of what they really need to be doing. So they add another tool on it that's overlapping features. So you have duplicate costs, like Troy was saying, potentially interfering with the functionality of those applications. So just really, you got to reassess what you have sometimes too, of like, you put your tools out there, sometimes take a step back and understand, like, is this still the right tool set for our operations?
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're going to get into it more in depth later on. But like, I think what you're just telling me then is when you're going to deploy things in your environment, whether it's a security tool or any software application or any changes to your technology, you need to be mindful and plan it, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
let me ask you this, Bo. I mean, so with our client base, we're mindful and planning for like one-off things, but how do we address like is there any kind of recurring effort that we do around the steady state stuff with regards to being mindful and planning?
Uh, I guess I'm not picking up what you're putting down there. What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
Like
I guess.
with specifically with tools or with configuration of those tools?
I mean, really all of it, the technology environment as a whole, right? Are there things that we do on a regular basis, on a regular cadence to make sure that we're being mindful around the tools we have? Like you touched on it before, assessing what you have,
Yeah.
when you first put it in, and then, at some point in time, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually, reassessing what it is, and is it still doing what you need it to do? Is there things that it's not doing?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's levels to that, right? So one of the levels is just assessing, what framework that you're using to know what controls you need in place. So cybersecurity frameworks are going to be fluid. They're going to be updating on a regular basis. Generally, you're going to see an update every, couple years at minimum, maybe some minor updates as you go. So you need to be looking at that and making sure that the controls that you have out there are still the appropriate controls. Now, when you're tying that into tools that are putting those controls in place, those tools change over time. So you have to be looking at the features and functionality of those tools. Do those still do what you need to do? Do they scratch the itch that you're trying to? And then, once you have those tools out in the environment, you need to make sure that the configuration of those tools is still up to par. And that's kind of what Tracy was referring to, with, there's things that we do monthly according to tools, just to make sure that they're still in place. And, simple as, are they deployed where they need to be? And are they scans happening when they need to be? And do they integrations and notifications still going to the people that we expect to? Really important things to have, because you need that visibility into the environment. But then there's certain things that you do on a monthly basis and annual basis. So you're kind of looking at the tool set, like what you need for a tool set, and then also how that tool set's deployed, because over time that's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would
Awesome.
say at a very basic level, to have a software asset inventory list, right? Here's all the stuff we need. This is why we need it. And
Yeah.
if you have items that all of a sudden show up that aren't on that list, right, that it probably needs to be cleaned up
Mm-hmm.
or added
It can
to
be a
the list.
difficult thing in a customer environment too, because there's so much software out there, but you got to have a starting point. You got to know what you're installing out there and start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. So we identified, problems with tool sprawl being escalated costs associated with it, and maybe some inefficiencies in the workplace. Is there anything else, Bo, that you see coming out of tool sprawl? Any other issues or complexities?
Well, I guess it's not necessarily a tool itself, but kind of is when you're looking at security, but really identities can become a problem. Where's that source of truth for the logins or the accounts that you have in an environment? Because there's accounts everywhere these days. And generally, we're not seeing a ton of companies go through and try to simplify that. So they'll have, a legacy Active Directory on premises where they have, that's where all the accounts are. And then they start, over years, they probably have now a cloud presence in Google or Microsoft are the two most popular. So probably synchronizing those clouds or those local accounts to the cloud, or maybe they have just set those up separately. And then maybe they have a cloud-based ERP system. So they're setting up some logins there, and then they're setting up some accounts in another system, right? So then you just have this massive identity sprawl, and you don't know who should have access to what. And there's different credentials, and everything requires multi-factors. So really, making sure you have the logins, what people should have access to, you have the security controls on those accounts can become a difficult thing because you're not talking like 1 or 2 systems these days. You're talking 5, 10, maybe even more for some, because there's so many different systems, and all these cloud-based systems have a different login. They're not necessarily going to be integrated out of the gate. So it's just, and it builds up over time, and nobody really even, like, you kind of think of like, oh, I don't realize I'm logging into all these different systems. It just starts to happen over time, and that becomes part of the normal workflow. And then the kind of the last part with that is that stuff never gets cleaned up. Like we see this in so many different accounts where it's, somebody left 2 years ago and like they just stopped using an account, but nobody disabled it, revoked the license, checked the roles. Or like another thing too with identities we see quite frequently is, people changing roles in the permissions on there, right? They just have the incorrect permission. So it's just this fragmented identity and not having understanding, the security ramifications that come with those identities in managing those properly. They just build and they get complex, and it's 5, 10, 15 systems and all this complexity built on top. It's hard to clean that up and make sure it's secured the way it needs to be.
And so you're saying that there is opportunities to even save costs when we're doing this, right? Because if we have a bunch of licenses that are no longer being consumed, and yeah, we go add new licenses, we add new users because we didn't really have a good control, like Troy said, over our software inventory. You could be spending money on new licenses you don't even need.
Yeah, we see that quite frequently. Like when we're onboarding new customers, it's just kind of revisiting, like, how are you using this technology? Because, sometimes if you use technology in a different way, there's a new feature. Hey, this licensing that we're using this for actually could go away. We don't even need to license that. It's going to be more secure. It's going to be lower cost. So it's just, you got to reevaluate those identity systems and make sure those are healthy, just like you would any other tool in your environment.
When I guess try to make people understand what we're talking about here, you said if there's 10 pieces of software and you got 20 users, that's 200 accounts at a relatively small organization, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, again, like Troy said, back to that software inventory, super important. Troy, so question for you. Can't we just get another tool to fix this problem?
Yeah, it goes back to what I said right away, like identify the problem first and then how you're going to fix it. I mean, like we talked about, there's a lot of overlap. And the more tools the more tools you throw on there doesn't fix the problem. And most of the time people aren't watching what they put on there. That's the problem, right? You install a tool, nobody's watching whether it's alerting, where it's alerting to, whether it's running or not. So, going back to the basics of here, we're trying to solve for antivirus and malware. Okay, what product are we going to use? How is it set up? How is it measured, right? Is it doing what we purchased it for? I mean, all that. I mean, if you just keep throwing tools at it, you're creating overhead, you're creating confusion. You're not really sure what platform is doing what all the time. It just becomes a black hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to get into the whole identity as like our new security perimeter kind of discussion, we talked in previous conversations on Unscripted. We talked downtime, we talked insurance. Now we're talking about this identity sprawl, identity fragmentation. I guess, Bo, why is identity such an important foundational element to IT and cybersecurity?
I mean, I kind of alluded to it previously. Really, it controls the access into the environment. I mean, that's where you're going to use those credentials and those accounts to authenticate and get access to the systems and data, right? So that's like, if you don't have those set up right and you're not controlling the authentication and access properly, you potentially some significant risks present themselves there. Also with that, like setting up the proper role-based access, you're gonna prevent like any, the account, like accounts having too much access, right? So that's kind of another huge part of that identity, is making sure the role base and who needs what access to do what in that is controlled in the most appropriate way. Because these systems, we see this all the time, is where just instead of somebody going and tuning these systems and figuring out roles need access to what systems, you just start turning off security, just give them more access, and suddenly you have everybody's an administrator and they just using like, I'm just with normal workflow just presents significant risk because suddenly, they did an accidental action just part of their workflow, and they maybe have granted, a third party access or integrated a tool where they didn't realize what they were doing. So that kind of stuff, just making sure then you really can secure that perimeter around the identity and around the organization with those the correct permissions.
Like what I see all the time, and this the high level is, just because you're an IT admin in a company doesn't mean you log in as an IT admin every morning.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're a domain admin or a global admin in Microsoft, you log off as your user account, you log back in as the admin role you need to fix or change whatever you want. Then you log back out and log back in with the other account, right? Like using those accounts too often puts them at risk for bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess for either one of you guys, so when we have identity aligned properly in an organization, what's different about that organization versus the organization?
I have one thing, Bo, you can go into detail, but I think when we get single sign-on working, people had no idea you could even do that at some organizations. We have so many people with so many cloud apps now, and they have a different username or different password for all, well, usually the same password for all of them, right? And they got 10 things to log into. When you can actually show them that, maybe 80% of this can be single sign-on with your login to your, Azure or Microsoft domain, it blows people away and it secures the environment so much more. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really simplifies the workflow for the end user, because you think about a lot of the workflow with this. We have a customer that we're working with and trying to simplify their environment. They got 3 different cloud systems they log into, multi-factor on all of them, different multi-factor on all of them, different passwords on all of them. And it's just like for the user to remember like what am I logging into? What is my password for this one? So what you see then is like reuse of passwords to different accounts, right? And it just exposes more and more problems where if I can authenticate against one, now I can get access to everything I need. From an administrative perspective, it really allows us to put in the right controls and have the right audit logging and everything that we would need to make sure, that access is controlled the way it needs to be. Because we don't have to go tune 10 different systems. We tune one, right? We integrate with that one, and we know our access policies are on there. We sleep a lot easier at night.
I can't imagine not only not knowing, you figure out what your username and password is for this, but is which MFA app do I have to open on my phone for this cloud thing? That's crazy. Doesn't work.
I mean, so single sign-on is like, it's a term I'm sure a lot of people have heard. Even if you're not in technology, you might have heard of SSO, but you really don't understand what it means. So what you're telling me is not only are we going to make that workflow process easier for the end user that's using all these systems, we're also going to have one source of truth and ensure that the organizationally approved security mechanisms are going to be in place no matter what system they're logging into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, anything else you guys like to add around identity fragmentation? Great. Well, I mean, we got about 10 minutes left here. Kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on then is we talked about tool sprawl and the costs and inefficiencies that an organization experiences with that, the overlap. We talked about identity fragmentation and how that, exposes you to more risk and also is inefficient for the users. To solve those 2 problems, I guess what would you start with? Like, where would you start, Bo? Like what?
I mean, I would start building a plan. Like, we talk a lot about this of starting and identifying what controls you want to put in place before you're even looking at anything else, right? I mean, you're going to have some legacy technology, everybody does, but to implement the right security and the right tool set, you got to know what you're trying to do, right? Building those standards and the cybersecurity framework, a lot of the legwork's done for you because the experts have put together, here's the controls you need in place to mitigate the necessary risks. A lot of these frameworks too, they're gonna like with IG or with CIS, they put these in implementation groups to simplify. Like the basics. IG1, implementation group 1, is really meant to be where universally all companies can benefit by putting those controls in place. And then looking at kind of those increased controls from there. IG2, a little bit more complex, and 3 is the most complex, high risk companies. There's certain controls that they need. So just starting with that framework and knowing these are the boxes I need to check, then allows you to kind of, when you're looking at tools and looking at what you're doing, you can cross-reference and say, yeah, am I checking the right boxes? We talk about that a lot. Is like just validating, are we doing the right things?
So back to having a plan, having a strategic plan, right? Just not, shooting from the hip and it just, buying things and implementing things, being very methodical with that. And I guess I know you guys talk to our clients all the time about being super disciplined, right? Super disciplined. Discipline is easy, but it's also hard. And so but having a plan, following a process to implement that plan is the number one advice we give our clients when it comes to implementing a better approach to a security program.
Takes time too. That's the other part I'd like to add on this. There's going to be some technology in use, and so in order to transform that technology and make sure all those controls are in place, it's going to take planning that systematic change within the environment. You got to be mindful of the workflow impacts that security is going to bring. That's a big thing that we see as we start to put the controls in place. A lot of companies are just on board. Yeah, we got to have more security, and then we've seen this time and time again. You start making those changes. Well, it changes the workflow, right? They now have multi-factor. So, that's kind of a pain in the butt to do this. And the next thing is they got to go do something else, or this system logs in first. Then they want those controls turned off because, hey, this isn't, it's impacting workflow and it's changed there. And so it's some of that leadership support of why we're doing this and being mindful of how this is going to change, because that's another part with a lot of these tools. It depends on how you implement those and the impact on the workflow. So you kind of need to know what we're doing from a security perspective, and also be okay with some of the changes in the workflow, but you got to make sure they're within reason as well.
One that, like, we've talked about this, I think, in previous conversation, right? That's why these types of initiatives are top down, right? It's not an IT initiative pushing it up. Like you said, it's leadership pushing it down. So when we've all heard of the stories where not with any of our existing clients, but we've seen this in the past, right? We start to deploy different things to try to improve or bolster security. And now maybe the CEO says, hey, can you take that off? Because I don't like that, because I got to do this or do that differently. Like,
slowed me down, just give me admin rights.
Yeah, that's not,
I don't want to call in or submit a request to have this pushed out and configured correctly. I'll do it myself. Give me access.
And a lot of things we talk about with our clients, I know you do, and we talk about it here too, right? It's when we say it's a top-down approach, it's a cultural shift. Like cybersecurity and being diligent around it is a commitment culturally, right? So I guess Troy, any comments with regards to measuring security programs, implementing security programs? I guess.
Well, I think if you don't know what you're doing, partnering with somebody you can trust is a big deal. I think a lot of times people think they're doing the right thing. They get confused by MDR and EDR and Volscan and like, what are all these products doing? And they don't. Maybe who they're talking to is a salesperson that is going to get paid by the more stuff they sell. Half the time I talk to people, they don't know what MDR is versus EDR. They don't really know what a vulnerability scanner is or what pen testing is. They at a high level maybe, but not where how they overlap and what is used for what. What does their company need if they're a small mom and pop versus a hospital. It's like, I think there's just a lot of confusion out there of how we layer these products.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just getting more complex, right? So as we take clients on this journey, this cybersecurity improvement journey, I guess what are some of the things that you're seeing in real time come out of it, Bo, with you and your team? What are you seeing?
I mean, we see security improvements over time. I mean, it takes time to get the right security in place. I mean, we kind of talked about that before, but um, we have a cyber check score that we developed ourselves. That's kind of a mix of how many CIS controls we have in place, some other reporting that has some metrics on our security tools, patching levels, right? And we score that then we can use to translate what security looks like in their environment and set our goals, right? Like we want to move you up into the secured level at this point range, and here are the things we need to focus on. And some of that is like, it could be simple as just, hey, you got to get your cybersecurity training done. We're seeing a huge hit there, or we got to adhere some more of these controls, like these CIS controls in your environment. And here's the next round that we're going to go through and make sure are adopted and are part of our service delivery, right? Because it takes time to go through and make sure that those are implemented properly. But it's going through that and then seeing like, yes, we've made some structural improvements in our cybersecurity. We're measuring it with our ongoing cyber check tool. And then the last thing is like when we talk with customers, they see this and less noise, they see less risk, they haven't had issues, right? So all of that does lead to results in the grand scheme of things. But it, like more than anything, it's just a commitment to making those changes to do the right thing from cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, and it's amazing what can get accomplished with regards to increasing your cybersecurity posture in 12
Mhm.
months.
It's not just tools, right? Like a lot of people are like, I'm just going to buy a tool for this and a tool for that. In certainly we select tools that allow us to implement those controls and make sure that we are doing those things. But so much of doing the right cybersecurity is just having those processes. About half of it is, I would say, is just making sure the procedures are in place to do the things that we need to do, because tools can't do everything.
Mhm. Well, that's great. And we got 3 minutes left here, fellas. I got two questions left. I'll throw them out there. Whoever wants to field the first one can. My first question is, can you give us one sign of when a company has tool sprawl? Anyone?
I would say it's when we talk with them of like, why are you using these tools, right? Like when you see like tools that are doing similar things and they have them and they don't know why. They don't know what they're trying to do is a really good indication that they don't have a plan, that they bought some tools and put them in there and hopefully solving the problems, knowing, hey, these kind of complement themselves, but why do I have this EDR and MDR and I'm doing this for my identity threat protection? Like, why are you using those in conjunction and they have no idea? They probably don't have those figured out and aligned.
That's what I see going to somebody's office and their taskbar has like 8 things running in the background and they don't know what half of them are, or they have 7 VPN applications in their environment and they don't know why. I think we've
Mm-hmm.
got sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we also kind of see if we're talking to a prospect and they got maybe 3 different partners doing different things. Sometimes the different things are overlapping as well. So that's probably not a good thing. So the last question here, whoever wants to take it, what's the fastest way to create measurable progress with regards to security? Now we talked about it being a journey, but what's the first thing you should do?
I mean, if it were me, I would say use something like CIS as a roadmap and go through those different controls and see where you are checking the boxes, whether it's CIS or something like that. That's where I would start. I don't know what you would say, Bo.
Yeah, I mean, I would say work with a partner who knows and is focused on cybersecurity is probably the fastest way.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
it's like to develop a lot of that in-house. I mean, we've really focused on it over the years. It really built up and made sure our services are focused around cybersecurity. So that's probably, partner with somebody who knows cybersecurity is going to be the fastest thing that you could do, and just make sure that they're aligned when they're doing it, that they're not creating their security program out of the blue with what they've learned in the past, but it's aligned with a known, established cybersecurity framework.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the right partner is going to do what Troy just said, right? They're going to probably already
Yeah.
have a well-known framework that they're going to follow. So,
Yeah.
well, that's all we have today. Thanks again for joining us, fellas. I love the conversations we have. I feel like this is real meaningful stuff. Hopefully the listeners got something out of it. To wrap, then, security maturity does not come from more tools. We talked at length on about that. It comes from structure, alignment, and measurable progress, one brick at a time, right? As we move forward into 26, clarity and consistency will separate reactive environments from the most resilient ones. Thanks again for joining us on Unscripted with SST, and see you next time.